Thank you very much, Chi. And now for our session on maritime decarbonization. This is a topic which is actually very close to my heart. Started really with meeting one of the panelists here today, Elizabeth from Neptune. Back in 2018, HAX was looking at different areas to decarbonize, and we were mostly looking at manufacturing because that's the area that we knew well, and stumbled across Neptune, which I would describe as love at first sight. We thought the team was just fantastic. They were creating huge impact in an area that was kind of honestly unseen to us, despite the fact that I was living right next to a shipping port at that time. Hadn't really noticed the fact that there are these huge container ships and other ships going around the world producing huge amounts of greenhouse gases. And so we started to invest more in the space. We're up to now 10 investments. But if I kind of look at the VC activity into maritime decarbonization, actually it's very, very small. If you take like transport and look at all the VC dollars that have gone into transport, maritime decarbonization is just about 10% of that, even less actually over the past 10 years. And in the past 4 years, there's been a very large acceleration in decarbonizing the airlines. And so to me, this seems like a great opportunity for investors, for founders to look at. Turns out when you start to scratch the surface a little bit, there are some really good reasons why people have not worked on decarbonization. And so today I am joined by 3 panelists who are all experts in their area, who are going to talk a little bit about what they're doing and how we can accelerate some of the technologies that are there, also some of the challenges for the industry. So by way of introduction, I am joined by Koizumi-san, who has been at NYK for decades now, and is head of the decarbonization side of NYK. They're taking a very forward-looking approach to decarbonizing. I'm joined by Terry from AltaSea. Terry was formerly the secretary for the EPA California under Governor Schwarzenegger, and now is heading up AltaSea, which he'll talk all about as the president and talk all about in a bit. And then lastly, Elizabeth, CEO of Neptune Robotics, an awesome company that's just making some fantastic progress decarbonizing this hard-to-abate sector. Okay, so the first question I have actually really is for Elizabeth. Elizabeth, we first met you 6 years ago. You've been in the sector now for all of that time. How has it changed, and what are some of the drivers in the industry which are helping the adoption of your technology?
So thank you very much, Duncan, for the introduction, and it's a pleasure to be in the panel about decarbonization. So we started 6 years ago, right? When we first met, we were the 3 of us, and it's been and we are developing robots and software to help vessels improve their fuel performance. So in this process, there has been a lot of progress in this industry, including the IMO. When we started, there were not many policies around the world or in different countries to motivate decarbonization. And there were limited commercial work, at least according to public information back then. But of course, later we understood that a lot of the huge shipping companies have been working on decarbonization projects secretively or internally. So across the 6 years, we have launched our hull cleaning, robotic hull cleaning services in more than 60 ports now. And I would like to mention especially the IMO MEPC 378 guideline last year. There was a guideline issued by the IMO officially in biofouling species, and biofouling is what you grow, what the vessel's hull grow along the time if you do not clean it. And that's what creates the friction when you sail. And cleaning off these biofouling really help improve the fuel efficiency of vessels. And last year, the IMO issued an official guideline in dividing the types, the rating, and what level of biofouling requires hull cleaning, as suggested by the IMO. And I think this was a very, very strong push by the IMO in starting with a guideline and perhaps very soon with more regulations in the future of mandatory regulations. And it has helped all of our clients in making decisions, making informed decisions, making fair decisions, and standardized decisions on when to clean and how to clean and in what frequency. So I think we have been very lucky. We started 6 years ago. And not last year, because then we're much more prepared for these international regulations. And thank you very much, for investing in us and following up in all of our rounds after the initial investment.
It's been a fantastic journey so far. That journey really started though with looking primarily at cost saving as well, right? So fuel is one of the biggest costs within the maritime transport sector. It emits more I think 50% more than the airline industry in terms of emissions because of the types of fuels that are used, but the cost is a large driver, and that's something that you've been concentrating on as well. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. According to our data, more than 66% of a fleet's cost is on fuel consumption, and that can go even higher. When our clients switch to alternative fuels, and what we are saving for our clients are between 6% to 18% of their annual fuel consumption via robotic hull cleaning. So it will depend on the frequency of cleaning and level of biofouling of the vessel before clean. And that's a huge amount of money when you know how big global fleets are and how much of fuel they consume every year. And I think this will become even more difficult and more costly side of the expense when our clients switch to more greener solutions in the future. I'm sure Koizumi-san has a lot more to add in this.
We'll talk all about fuels in a bit, but before we do, I just wanted to open up to the others. What changes have you seen? Any significant changes, let's say since COVID, since everybody started looking at the world as something which was precious and something we needed to protect? How have you seen in each of your roles changes within the industry?
I don't know if it's been since COVID, but I think, as Elizabeth mentioned, it all starts with policy. To me, the solution to the climate crisis is policy, technology, and finance. And the policies, whether they come from IMO or whether they come, in my case, from the state of California, demanding cleaner fuels, at least along the coastline or in ports, emissions reductions in the ports themselves, which we'll talk about, or whether it's the shippers and the big companies like Amazon that are putting products on ships that are demanding greenhouse gas reductions. You can't change over that infrastructure quickly. And so I think many of them are looking for solutions like this, where if you can at least get more fuel efficiency, that's one way of reducing emissions, not just greenhouse gas emissions, but in ports all over the world. We've talked to over 150 port and terminal operators in the last year. And one common theme is that their communities around the ports are suffering from bad air quality. And a lot of that, of course, has to do with trucks and traffic coming in and out of the port. But if you can reduce it from the ships and from the container handling equipment and the other activity in the port itself, then you'll improve the conditions around the ports for those communities.
Elizabeth, you work quite closely with ports. What do you see that they care about, and why are you working directly with the ports?
Yes. So when we started, not a lot of ports cared about this, and not a lot of ports even heard of robotic hull cleaning. But today, when we approach, new ports that we're expanding into, the first question that they ask is, okay, is this an environmental solution? And how environmental you guys are? They assume that the technology is already there, and as long as the technology is there, the next question is it has to be completely environmental. And when I say environmental, it means when we conduct hull cleaning, we have to collect the debris while we conduct the hull cleaning. And this was very difficult without the technology. Without the technology, it's impossible. For example, for divers, when you conduct cleaning, you cannot pick up all the debris. That's only And this is only possible with robots. And nowadays, when ports know that there is existing technology that can conduct environmental hull cleaning, they go for environmental immediately. And a lot of ports are even, thinking of stopping the not as environmental solutions, because everyone knows that ports, after the global regulations, the next step would be the ports. The ports would be the middlemen that support the global regulations, and the global regulations plus the port regulations combined would really push the industry, the shipping companies into, whenever I conduct hull cleaning, I have to go for the environmental solution, because this is what the IMO suggests me, and this is what the port how the port regulates. So these days we see basically all ports that we reach out to, they are asking for the most environmental solution, and that's what we're giving them.
We've mentioned IMO a couple of times. Koizumi-san, I know that that's an organization you deal with quite a bit. I'd love to just understand a bit more about your relationship with them, how they kind of implement regulations and what the impact is for you.
IMO stands for the International Maritime Organization, which is a UN agency which sets standards and regulations for the safety, security, and the environmental protection issues in international shipping. So we are a Japanese shipping company, but we are not governed by the Japanese law, but we are governed by the regulation under IMO. Because it is a UN agency, it contains about member states is about 175 member states. So, because NYK Line is a commercial shipping company, we do not have a voting right, or we don't have a chance to state our opinion in the IMO meeting. Rather, what we do in the IMO meeting is to give a technical and commercial input to Japanese delegations, and indirectly to reflect our opinions in the IMO meeting. Which for the environmental issue, MEPC meeting, which Elizabeth mentions, which stands for the Marine Environmental Protection Committee. In that committee, now the big discussion is going on. What kind of the GHG midterm reduction measure should be implemented? And once that regulation is implemented, we are regulated by that. And talking about the fuels, many people think that the future fuel is like a e-ammonia or e-methanol. But unfortunately, that kind of the new e-methanol or e-methanol and e-ammonia cannot be available maybe until 2030 or so. So, from 5 years. So until that time, what we do is, we say that very traditional way to reduce emission from the vessel. One of the very strong option is, as Elizabeth mentions, hull cleaning, abatement cost for the GHG reduction. I mean, how much we have to spend to reduce the emission. I think the hull cleaning is the most effectively and the most cheap to reduce emission. And we are actually forming up the partnership with Elizabeth Neptune to reduce our emission. So taking this opportunity, I have to thank you very much for that, Elizabeth. Thank you.
Thank you for the joint study. It's amazing. Yes.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, just talking to IMO, I know that they accelerated the goals recently, and as we mentioned, there's been a lot of talk around fuels, and I do want to discuss that because they provide, in the future, a way to get to net zero. But as you mentioned, they're going to take some time. And I believe there was an acceleration just over a year ago to 40% reduction of GHGs from the maritime sector. So aside from robotic hull cleaning, what other technologies are you looking at to implement? This is for Terry and Koizumi-san. What technology are you looking to implement in the near-term future while we're waiting for some of the fuels to come online?
Well, I would say the ports themselves. So AltaSea in the Port of Los Angeles is a nonprofit that is dedicated to advancing the blue economy in every way. So that includes port decarbonization. As you say, a lot of focus is on the ships and the fuels, and it's great that we have near-term solutions that can just make existing ships more efficient, like Neptune. That is really fantastic. And Elizabeth, I want to circle back to you because I can't tell you how much excitement I have heard from different ports and shipping companies. But the ports themselves, of course, are the source of a lot of emissions from all the container handling equipment. Here in the Port of Los Angeles, for example, we have over 3,000 pieces of diesel container handling equipment that all has to be electrified by 2030. And all of the drayage trucks, tens of thousands that haul cargo in and out of the port, have to be zero emission by 2035. So there again, the policy is driving the technology. The technology is there, but it's expensive. And of course, things like battery electric container handling equipment works, but the duty cycles are not always perfect. Takes a long time to recharge batteries. And many ports don't have enough electricity if everything was electrified tomorrow. So we're also looking at hydrogen electric. But in that case, the new equipment hasn't been mass produced. It's expensive, and the fuel itself is expensive. So there's a lot of hurdles to overcome, not to mention things like the ports themselves, where many ports around the world are just the landlord. It's actually the terminal operators that are responsible for what's happening on their terminal and the emissions from those different vehicles and so on. And so you can work with the ports and they can push and they can set policy, but ultimately you've got to get to that next layer of business and make the business case to the terminal operators as well.
So for the international shipping, I think the way to reduce the emission is maybe two ways. One way is to lower the carbon intensity of the fuel, and the second one is raising the efficiency of the operation. And the lowering the carbon intensity, as I mentioned, the future e-methanol or e-ammonia cannot be available until 2030. But at this moment, we are using biofuel, biogas, and LNG, which can reduce somewhat for the carbon intensity than the traditional fuel oil. And the second one is to raise the energy efficiency of the vessel. We are using, again, this is a traditional way, but this is operation-wise. We are using such as a weather routine service and minimize waiting time and loss of time so that we don't have to use so much fuel. In addition, for the technical measures such as low friction paints and wind assist, air lubrication system, weight heat management system, and other energy saving devices most effective way to reduce to raise energy efficiency. And again, hull cleaning and the propeller cleaning is one of the most effective way to lower emission from the vessel.
I'm glad we're talking about ammonia. I think if we had done a shipping decarbonization panel without talking about ammonia, we would have been hunted by a variety of different people. Terry, I'd love to just discuss this a little bit with you because ammonia, and methanol and a variety of others have huge promise, but in particular ammonia. However, it does come with some challenges, and a lot of those challenges are really to do with how you store that ammonia, bunker it at the ports. Wondering if we could just get your perspective on those alternative fuels as they relate to implementation within the ports.
Well, you raise good points, which are that many of the communities around ports oppose ammonia just because it's obviously potentially hazardous, although it's being used all over the world all the time, but it makes it difficult to get permitting in many cases. Of course, to make it green or truly sustainable, it's going to come from hydrogen. Instead of coming from fossil fuels, that's got to be green hydrogen, which is expensive. We're looking at projects that we're seeing in Saudi Arabia, for example, using abundant sunlight there to electrolyze water and turn that into hydrogen, then convert that to ammonia to make it easier to transport and bring it all the way to Los Angeles, where it's then turned back into hydrogen. So these are very extraordinary products or projects that will take, years and years to bring to fruition and will be very challenging economically. So I do think we have to look at what Koizumi-san was saying and what Elizabeth is saying is get every ounce of efficiency that we can first, because that's things that can be done in the near term. And then also look at the ports themselves. And then we're seeing new technologies that will actually do scrubbing from the emissions. We have one company, actually there's a couple in the Port of Los Angeles, Stacks with an X, and Greener Port Solutions. There's a third one that when at least the ships are in port, they'll put a cone over the smokestack of the ship and clean the emissions. But now that is being made portable so that can actually be installed in a couple of containers on the ship, and it scrubs the emissions while the ship is underway. So that may be something that, again, is an interim solution, not only because, as Koizumi-san says, it will take quite a while to get these fuels deployed, but there will be regulatory pushback or community pushback, and they therefore won't be available everywhere. Of course, if a ship gets to one port and fuels up and then gets to the other port and can't, that's a problem.
Right. Yeah, carbon capture on ships is an interesting area. I've seen a couple of companies, another one called Seabound, that, I think that is a direction that should be explored. One thing that strikes me is that the port would need to be involved with taking the carbon dioxide off the ship at the end. Is that something that you've explored? Are there challenges there?
Yes, and one of the companies we've looked at is called Carbon Ridge, and they have a program along those lines. Of course, it depends what form you're taking the carbon or the other emissions, how you're capturing them, what form they're in when you then take them off the ship. But that's something we're all very familiar with. We see break bulk handling all the time and gas handling all the time, coming and going from ships. In many ways, that may be easier to permit than even some of these new fuels. And then, of course, it's not just permitting the fuels and having the bunkering available, it's getting someone to produce those fuels. So, to shipping companies like NYK, you need the off-takers to sign the contracts to say, look, if you build it, we will come.
Koizumi-san, is carbon capture on ships something that you've explored?
Yes, this is an option, but we believe that the carbon capture is kind of not so much efficient way to use on the ships, because once the carbon is captured and it has to be stored in on board either the liquid or solid side, and to keep the carbon on the liquid and the solid, it using energy. And once the carbon is captured, this has to be discharged by from the ship, and somewhere stored somewhere in a rig. So this involves so much carbon as well, of course, cost itself. So I think even though the carbon capture is possible on the ship, but I think that using on the land basis, like carbon capture from the power plant is the most effective, even though we do not deny that that the height of the temperature, because we can continuously use fuel. Traditional fuel, but we are questioning whether this is efficient or not.
Now, some alternative fuels outside of traditional HFO have been started to be used in the industry. Elizabeth, have you seen this with some of your operations? Are you starting to now see alternative fuels being used? Does that change anything about what you're doing?
Yes, we do. So these days, since last year, we've been seeing LNG bunkering in ports that we operate. Obviously, ports are a lot more concerned compared to bunker fuels. And whenever an LNG bunker vessel comes by, everyone stops working and until it starts bunkering. And I think this is a very good direction, because although LNG might not be the best in the future, but it is one of the best solutions now. And it's seeing our clients, bunkering LNG and then conducting robotic hull cleaning by us environmentally, we really see shipping companies, including NYK, they are doing all sorts of ways and all in squeezing every bit of efficiency, fuel efficiency, and the carbon reduction here. So conducting hull cleaning and with LNG, and probably doing something else, something more on board. And everything within 16 hours of port stay. And we do a lot of these operations these days, and we understand that every bit counts, and it's very it's a very supportive opportunity, but it's only available in a very limited port these days. So within the 60 ports that we cover, I think less than 10% have LNG right now, but I think there would be a lot more, and it will take time for the ports to also implement different sorts of alternative fuel and different solutions.
Koizumi-san, you have alternative fuel ships at the moment. How is that going to change? I mean, you also transport a lot of energy, so how is this kind of change to these exotic new fuels that maybe, as we just heard, made in one country and then shipped halfway across the world to be bunkered in another? How does that affect MYK's business?
Well, in terms of the fuel transition, we have been using LNG for the fuel for more than 40 years. So we have a lot of the experience about using a gas fuel. But because the LNG contains a carbon, so I don't think that this is ultimate, the fuel. What we are looking at this moment is ammonia. And actually, we have been developing a technology to use ammonia safely and efficiently. And in August this year, actually, we delivered the world's first commercial operating vessel, tugboat, which is fueled by ammonia. So we are now using ammonia tugboat to commercial purposes to see whether this is safe and this is efficient way, even though this is still in a gray ammonia, but to prove that the ammonia can be used as a marine fuel, maybe if the change, the time has changed, that the ammonia is available, we can operate ultimate zero emission vessel. And by 2026, we will deliver the ammonia gas carrier, which is propelled by the ammonia. So this is our challenge, and start using LNG as a kind of the technology for the using gas fuel. We are developing a new energy to use the ammonia, and obviously we are looking at methanol as well. But the methanol, the technology is already proven, so the availability is whether if the e-methanol is once the e-methanol is available, we can quickly switch to the zero emission vessels.
Fantastic. All right, I think we're just about at time. Were there any last thoughts from the panelists?
I would just add, again, sort of some focus on the ports themselves, because in the meantime, while LNG is being used, which is a fossil fuel, but it's cleaner than typical bunker fuel, et cetera, there are ways to reduce the overall carbon footprint of goods movement. And that's really what's happening here. The ship is only one part of that, the port being another. That's why the hull cleaning is so important. That's why decarbonizing the port activities themselves are so important. And I think there's opportunities, of course, for cold ironing, where obviously the ships come and plug in. There's many ships that still haven't converted, and many terminals that haven't converted, so the ships can turn off their engines when they're in port. And of course, that's not the most amount of fuel that they're using. It's when they're underway, but every little bit helps.
Right. Yeah, and as you said, it's polluting the local environment, and that's an area that people often live in.
Yeah, I think the cooperation between among the ports and the shipping company and shipbuilding company and service providing company like Neptune can work for the shipping zero emissions, because shipping is categorized as a hard to abate sector. So every effort has to make zero emissions. So the cooperation among the parties related is the most important.
I just want to add in the end that please come to see us in Singapore. We'll be in Singapore very soon. We look forward to launching in the world's second biggest port in the world, and see you guys in Singapore in less than a month.
And Elizabeth, an open invitation to come demonstrate your product here in the Port of Los Angeles, the largest port in North America.
Yeah, well, definitely. That's the goal. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. This has been truly informative, and I hope it inspires investors and entrepreneurs to look at this sector. I think there's just a world of opportunity here, you know, I hope to see some new technologies coming out of this.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.